Good morning and welcome to the new episode of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. Since the day pandemic started, the latest pandemic, coronavirus, there have been conspiracies afloat, and I hate conspiracies. And the first conspiracy was that China purposely engineered coronavirus. Well, unsubstantiated conspiracies are a curse. But what happens when some disturbing facts, after being corroborated, come to light? Then at least one has to do it. Why? And who is responsible? Was coronavirus crisis a natural phenomenon, or was it engineered for selfish purposes? Now the evidence is mounting that China of course is guilty, but so is Canada partly because Yuan lab was having people who had worked and been trained in Canada. But fundamentally it was created as a weapon by USA to transform America. We don't know everything there is to know about coronavirus, but the emerging picture presents a very, very shocking and incredible scenario that looks to be plausible. It's possible, it's probable, may not have happened, but then evidence is there that the American leaders contributed to the engineered COVID-19 as a bioweapon, and the purpose was to fundamentally transform America. Now, you would say, what sort of? The fact is that the Yuan Institute, the Yuan Laboratory, is originally a joint venture project between the Chinese Academy of Science and Jean Mercure BSL-4 lab in France. It was completed on January 31st, 2015, and it took 11 years and $44 million. But even before it was completed, scandals had begun to come across. And as I said, this Yuan Institute of Virology was a joint venture of China and France. I happened to have a look at a State Department cable which was leaked 2009. The Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, warned 40 American allies that the Yuan lab could lead to bioterrorism. This was the statement by the Secretary of State. The French did not listen. They continued collaborating with the Yuan Institute of Virology until they were kicked out of the lab by the Chinese. And that happened in 27. And at that time, the Yuan lab began doing classified research for the Chinese military. At that time, the French are kicked out. And then, there's a investigative journalist, Shari Markuson. The State Department has obtained a book authored by 18 Chinese scientists and public health bureaucrats in 2015. And that describes severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus as the coming of a new era of genetic weapons. So this was in 2015 that the US Department had this document. 18 scientists had contributed, and the mention was there about severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus as a genetic weapon. The title of the volume was Unnatural Origin of SARS and Other Species of Man-Made Viruses as Genetic Weapons. And it was written there that this can be artificially manipulated into an emerging human disease viruses, then weaponized and unleashed as it has never been seen before. The scientists believe, the Chinese, that SARS was a bioweapon engineered in USA. So it was possible that some of them helped engineer SARS-2, that's coronavirus 2, as an act of revenge. And the Chinese scientists had been preparing for a world war fought not with atomic weapons, but with biological and genetic weapons. A reference is to the 2 atom bombs dropped in Japan. And then the book says that the bioweapons will be the core weapons for victory in the Third World War. Now there is a former State Department official, David Asher. He gave a press statement saying that the leading officials had warned USA that they have grave concerns about the kind of research being conducted in Yuan. And it was at the same time the book was released. So President Obama had access to enough intelligence to know the challenge of the Chinese on genetic research. And then he started collaborating with the China. This is the stupidity. You know that something is happening. And Barack Obama's science czar was Dr. P. Holter, one of the most radical appointees. He has written, Dr. Holter, extensively on global environmental change. And at one time, he said that there should be mandatory abortions so that the stresses on the environment can be reduced. In 1973, Holden had encouraged a decline in fertility to a well below replacement level because 210 million now is too many and 280 million in 2040 is likely to be much too many. So he called for a global regime to enforce population limits. And Obama made this man the enforcer of compulsory abortions as director of the Office of Science and Technology. Now what kind of research was Holden doing for Obama? On January 5, 2016, Nature magazine published an interview with Dr. Holden, and he said in the statement, I am going to China this week for a strategic and economic dialogue and for a US-China dialogue on innovation policy. We have a lot of cooperation with China on medical issues, biomedical issues, and we talk to them all the time about gain of function research and about gene editing quality. This should be enough to show that right from the president downward they were doing. So Holden was collaborating with the Chinese to make virus more deadly. Obama cut off funding for gain of function research in America. His administration paused this funding on October 17, 2014 because of the fears that such experiments could lead to a pandemic. Very good action. But he allowed this an exception to this funding ban if the research is necessary to protect the public health and national security. It should be done. So US military took advantage of that and instead of doing research in USA, started doing research in China, in Yuan Institute of Virology. Apparently, President Holden and the staff trusted Chinese communists more than they trusted US researchers. Then the congressman Guy Reschenwald uncovered that $1.1 million of the Obama-era taxpayer funding funneled to the Yuan Institute for Gain for Function Research to create a man-made virus by inserting a spike protein from a wild bat. USAID, Agency for International Development, awarded a funding of $600,000 to Yuan from the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And now this National Institute of Allergy is led by none other than Dr. Anthony Fauci. clearly Dr. Fauci knew about the dangerous genetic research being done in Yuan. He calls it a gain for function research, a technical title for bioweapon research. He was making mouse and bat coronavirus more deadly to human beings under the guise of vaccine research. And US government National Advisory Board for Biosecurity studied whether the research should continue or not. And then they said it should continue, but it entails significant risk. The board recommended additional security, but these recommendations of the committee were also ignored by President Obama. Then 11 days before Trump was to take office, Obama took another executive decision. He reauthorized the type of gain for function research he had banned in 2014 and resumed funding for creating coronavirus biological weapons in USA. Earlier they were doing only in Yuan. Now they started doing it. The authorization stated, quote, it will satisfy the requirement for lifting the current moratorium on certain life science research that would enhance a pathogen's virulence. Now, investigative journalist Bregman says that this authorization was only kick-starting funding within USA because the funding for weaponization of SARS coronavirus never actually stopped in 2014. This was a statement made on June 5, 2021. The next day to this funding, Dr. Fauci gave a speech at Georgetown University. Here he predicted coronavirus pandemic. And he said, no matter what, the history has told us definitely that outbreaks will happen because in facing infectious disease is a perpetual challenge. And Dr. Fauci was funding gain of function research in China while simultaneously doing the research and warning people to be ready for a pandemic. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, shades of that, not shades of grey. He never mentioned that he was involved in the dangerous manipulation of that coronavirus, which he was. But he seemed to be aware that the world was heading into a serious crisis. The fact that he made this statement just one day after Obama's reauthorized bioweapon research does make it suspicious, don't you think so? Now, this continued, and Markson told Steve Benson in his War Room broadcast that most of the scientific community thought of gain for research experimentation with deadly viruses was too dangerous. But nobody listened to them. Dr. Fauci used President Obama's reauthorization to restart his research in 2017. So most of the scientific community was against this research. But he continued research. So all the evidence suggests that COVID-19 originated in the lab, that the scientific community wanted nothing to do with until Obama, Jake Holton, and Anthony Fauci forced their will on everybody. What was their agenda? Why did they do it? Anti-national. Barack Obama wanted to be basically a controller of USA. And that's why he appointed Dr. Holton on the advisory board of biosecurity, which was not there. And the recommendation for reauthorization came from none else than Dr. Holton, the guy who said they should be compulsory, mandatory abortion. So Mark Bregman wrote in June 21, and the title is Interesting Timing, Obama's administration lifted block on gain for function research just 11 days. Was it to stop Trump? So the people beginning to recognize the US Department officials and intelligence community has been less than honest. Let's be very honest. And in some cases, they are downright lying regarding coronavirus. This was a politically motivated thing. And President Obama's administration technically authorized the restart of the research. Now, the result was that a new virus was created. And Dr. Stephen Q and Richard Mueller described how this was likely accomplished. They wrote an editorial in Wall Street Journal on June 6, 2021. And they wrote, the most compelling reason to favor the lab-leak hypothesis is firmly based in science. In particular, consider the genetic fingerprint of coronavirus responsible for this disease. A microbiologist can increase the lethality of coronavirus by splicing a special sequence into genome for the prime location. Doing this leaves no trace of manipulation, so no evidence is left. But it alters the spiked protein level, renders it easier for the virus to inject genetic material. And since 1992, now this is shocking, every administration since 1992 has been guilty of this. There have been at least 7 separate experiments adding a special sequence to the same location. So right from 1992 to 2020, that's 28 years, almost 3 decades. And the end result has always been supercharged viruses at the minimum. And that is what coronavirus was. Then, nobody has talked about it. The minority staff of the House Foreign Affairs Committee compiled an intelligence report, and it reads, the preponderance of evidence suggests that SARS-CoV-2 was accidentally released from a Yuan Institute of Virology sometime before September 12, 2019. Obama administration well knew the inadequate safety practices. They had seen red flags all over this high-stake building and facility, but nobody took any action about the warning. And then, in November 2019, the first patient, 55-year-old resident in Hubei province, fell, and the rest is history. And it has been a great cover-up as vital infection spread. Many people immediately asked about Yuan Institute. Of course, one of them was President Trump. Immediately, this demand was dubbed unscientific, conspiratorial, racist. Yet it is now well established that the Communist Party deliberately suppressed reports about this outbreak and even destroyed evidence of it. The National Health Commission of China ordered institutions not to publish anything about the unknown disease until it had already spread around the world. Emails from that time show that Dr. Fauci was well aware that it could have been a man-made, and some scientists he was working with were also aware. But publicly, the great scientist was insisting that it was almost spreading naturally from bats to the human beings. Can anything be more shocking? Then a statement was published in Lancet, the British medical journal, by 27 health scientists. It was published in February 2020. And the scientist said, we signed a statement in solidarity with all the scientists and the health professionals in China who continue to lie. We are all in this together with our Chinese part, and we stand together to condemn. Great. But what about the covert and the overt actions of the US administration? And then this process started of censoring dissent. 50 researchers were filed at National Institutes of Health in USA. 50 researchers because they had links with the Chinese Communist Party. And despite knowing that China was spying, the director, Dr. Collins, continued to serve on the advisory board of the big conference sponsored by BIG Genomics, a Chinese military-linked biogenomics firm. He has met Professor Kao to discuss the collaboration between NIH and the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences. These communist connections make it likely that he was one of the movers with Dr. Frekai. Then, American Institute of Economic Research got some emails through Freedom of Information Act. And it's shown that there was something really bad. You see, the whole thing is fraught with danger. The emails released through this Freedom of Information show very clearly that Collins and Foucault worked to suppress the Great Barrington Declaration. Now, what was this Great Barrington Declaration? It was a statement by Harvard Martin Culford, Oxford Sunitra Gupta, and Stanford J. Bhattacharya. These three people from Harvard, Oxford, and Stanford said there should be no blanket pandemic lockdowns. They wanted a policy that would not decimate the economy, but it was disregarded. So not only was the origin, but even the treatment or the effective control was purposely done to create chaos, fear, panic. And then purpose to increase the stranglehold of the people, make them subservient slaves. And then, was it not treason? Dozens of the government officials knew about this really happening, and none of them leaked the information. And what information came was ignored absolutely. And now, imagine, now, according to Johns Hopkins University, pandemic lockdowns only prevented 0.2% of the COVID-19 deaths. But saving lives was never the agenda. The goal was to use the pandemic to frighten people into surrendering their rights and freedom. One has to be suspicious when ultra-left collaborates with the communists in China, especially on something as sinister as bioweapon research. But is anybody listening? The whole thing is shocking and treasonous. It's a treachery to the humanity, not only to the country. Of course it's to the country. What we need is an independent neutral commission to go into details how the US departments have failed miserably since 1992, how France was involved, how Canada was involved, and was it a global conspiracy posing as champions of democracy to impose dictatorship and become the strongmen of those countries? Imagination staggers, and one is really shocked. I am. I'm sure you would be if you go through all the details. Thank you.